scumbag gambling page.
The weather. That used to be the go-to topic when meeting someone new. Today, people are gambling on it. In fact, for just 6 cents, you can bet that there will be a magnitude 8 earthquake in California before 2027. There are also wildfires, tornadoes, viruses, and diseases that you can bet on. But if that's not dystopian enough, soon you'll be able to bet on whether the FDA will approve treatments for cancer and Alzheimer's patients. While people are suffering from cancer, you'll be able to bet on their lives, because as Kalshi likes to advertise, it's a money hack.
I don't know why more people aren't doing this. I literally made $761.07 last night. I'm not a trader or anything. My friend literally just told me about this app called Kalshi. You basically pick what you think is gonna happen in real life. I saw this one where everyone was choosing the same side, the whole chart was green. If everyone thinks this is happening, it's probably happening. So I just picked the same thing they did. I woke up this morning and it paid out. Why aren't you guys doing this? It felt stupidly easy.
Why aren't you guys doing this? Just bet on the 99% of outcomes like everyone else. Join the herd. But here is the problem. Kalshi positions itself as being able to predict the future based on the bets people are placing, going so far as to create these ads, implying that since they can predict the future, they could have predicted past events like the odds of women gaining the right to vote and baseball contributing to the end of segregation. It is billboard rage bait. But how accurate is Kalshi? Because if everyone is just betting on the winning bet, that's not a prediction. And yet people still view it as a single source of truth. People look at the odds to gauge how likely something will actually happen.
To many Americans, these products look an awful lot like sports betting. To others, they're an innovative financial product that can help aggregate information and provide insight into future events.
Even people in the US government take it seriously. A recent study from the Federal Reserve Board concluded that Kalshi is a valuable complement to existing forecast tools in both research and policy settings. But let's keep in mind, one of their advisors is Donald Trump Jr., son of the president, who happens to have influence over the Fed. And other research shows it's not nearly as accurate as claimed. Last year, 2 researchers studied the accuracy of Kalshi, Polymarket, and PredictIt during the 2024 US presidential election. 93% of PredictIt markets correctly predicted outcomes better than chance. However, on Kalshi, the accuracy fell to 78%, and on Polymarket, 67%. And sure, there are some accurate predictions happening on Kalshi. But why is that?
We have officially entered the next realm of insanity, y'all. People are actually botting Spotify streams now, not to make the artist famous, but to win bets. On prediction markets like Kalshi and Polymarket, you can now actually place bets on which songs are going to top the charts. But here's the loophole now that people are exploiting. What if you don't actually have to predict the winner, but you manufacture it? The specific recent example was with Malcolm Todd's song Earrings, which suddenly jumped to #1 on Spotify's US top charts.
Is it an accurate prediction that a song hits #1 on Spotify if you deploy hundreds of bots to stream it over 500,000 times? Technically, yes. The song did jump nearly 70% in 2 days and hit #1, but only because it was manipulated. And that's Kalshi in a nutshell. In my opinion, they do not predict the truth. They just pay people to manufacture what they want the truth to be. And about betting on the weather, that's also being rigged. French authorities are investigating after a temperature sensor in Paris spiked twice in 1 month. And both times, the spikes matched bets placed on Polymarket, Kalshi's competitor. But somehow, it gets worse.
I was just approached by Kalshi, the gambling app, to make political and also election content for them for a sponsorship, and I basically told them to fuck off.
So Kalshi paid influencers were questioning the integrity of California elections. I thought it was a bit odd when myself, as well as several creator friends of mine, all got offers from Kalshi 2 days before the election last Sunday to do paid partnerships with them around the LA mayoral race, when none of us have been discussing the LA mayoral race and most of us don't even live in Los Angeles.
Why would Kalshi allegedly want influencers to create content around the Los Angeles mayoral race? Perhaps they want to influence election results? Is it a real prediction if you're influencing the outcome? And the insanity continues with the insider trading. Mr. Beast's own editor made bets on upcoming videos. A US military member bet that Venezuela's president would be forced out of power. And similar bets were made around the fate of Iran's supreme leader. And then of course there's George Santos. For days he insisted he would attend the State of the Union address. The odds of Santos attending was 74% on Kalshi. But when the speech started, he was nowhere to be found. He bet he would not attend, and surprise, he won. He did not show up. And it seems like just about everyone is promoting Kalshi.
I genuinely have a rage like no fucking other watching Alex Cooper from Call Her Daddy promote gambling on her platform. And this is because me and other small creators like me were offered the same deal by Kalshi, Polymarket, whatever, to promote it, and we turned it down. We turned it down because it's bad money. There's such a thing as bad money.
I agree with her take. It's why I don't work with sponsors. I don't want their money. But the number of influencers, celebrities, and news channels partnering with Kalshi is actually insane. Especially the news channels, because think about it. If you don't have insider information, the next best source of information is the news. But Kalshi is paying the news. And this is what I find laughable. Many news sources disclose that they have a commercial relationship with Kalshi, and some of them claim certain employees, like editors, aren't allowed to trade. But that doesn't stop editors from telling information to other employees. And that's the thing, if every user were banned from betting on their own company or the industry they worked in, there wouldn't be as many insider bets. But there also wouldn't be a prediction market. This is a perfect example. When will the FDA reclassify BBC 157 to Category 1? Do you know what that means? I don't. Who is betting yes that this will happen before November? Maybe someone who works in Big Pharma? Maybe someone at the FDA? They would have us believe it's just random people guessing. They act like insider information is a flaw in the system, but it is the entire system. And these are the two who built it.
At the end of the day, do we really want as a society people able to place bets on anything at any time on their phones? Is that a good idea for society?
I think we want to allow people to make money on what they know and what their hobbies are. I think the same way that we allow people to, if you know how to drive a car, you can make money on Uber. You should be able to make money out of what you know and your passions are and have your own freedom to decide how you want to make your income. And you see there's, for example, a lot of news junkies out there are making tens of thousands and millions of dollars trading on Kalshi because that's their hobby. That's what they're very, very good at.
These two are the founders of Kalshi. Tarek's resume before founding the company: Goldman Sachs, Citadel, Palantir. So, a real man of the people. Luana didn't answer the interviewer's question, but went on to say they want people to make money on what they know and their hobbies. She then compares it to Uber, which is an outrageous comparison. If you complete a ride for Uber, Uber pays you. On Kalshi, nothing is guaranteed. But don't take my word for it, we can look at some actual Kalshi users. This user, down $24,000. Another, down $8,900. This one, $6,500. And this user, down $28,000. That's nearly $70,000 between 4 people. But it doesn't stop anyone because now you can bet from anywhere.
Gave him her hands and he held his hand. Together they set off the unknown path in front of them. Sometimes they walked slowly, sometimes at a quicker pace. Sometimes they ran so fast it felt like defying. Whenever he lost his footing, she steadied him. And whenever she tripped, he helped.
Celebrating a bet during a wedding. That's how far it's gone. Nothing is sacred anymore. Hobbies are no longer hobbies for the sake of being hobbies because now you can make money on them. But let's say your hobby is watching basketball. Well, we know games have been rigged.
New tonight, a major college basketball betting scandal is now under investigation. Federal prosecutors have charged 26 people, including 15 Division I players, accused of being paid to underperform in NCAA games. Officials say that scheme stretched across 29 games, including contests in China.
So people are betting on games where some of the players might be rigging the outcome. Again, is it really a win if the other team threw the game? But maybe sports isn't your thing. That's okay. You can now bet on reality TV.
Now that these gambling companies have successfully gotten every man addicted to sports betting, their next target is women. That's why we're seeing all of these ridiculous Love Island Kalshi ads like this one. It's all part of a very deliberate strategy that the company has explicitly said. They're targeting women specifically using pop culture, and unfortunately, it seems like it's kind of working.
It makes sense financially why Kalshi would target women. After all, we are 50% of the population, and most of us aren't betting on sports. But it doesn't change how absurd and evil it is. And the sad part, according to the Roosevelt Institute, ordinary users appear to do even worse in prediction markets than they do in casinos. We don't have the exact numbers for Kalshi, but a study of Polymarket, one of its competitors, found that the top 1% of users capture 76.5% of all trading gains. There is no reason to think that Kalshi's numbers would look much different. So yes, some people do win. It's just overwhelmingly the same tiny group of people at the top. But ultimately, Kalshi only got here because of social media. There are thousands of people alleging they make millions of dollars off of these high-risk speculations like crypto and prediction markets.
Alright, so I think I accidentally made too much money at a young age, and I don't really know what to do anymore. Right now I'm just sitting in my McLaren, which is like one of my cars, but I also have a Maserati MC20, I have a Lamborghini Technica, my G-Wagon is parked outside, and I make over $500,000 every single month, so I just don't really know what else to do anymore.
All of the accomplishments she listed were just items. Cars, houses, jewelry. The achievement is consumerism. Well, that and being able to flex on TikTok. But so many people now aspire to be like her. And the audience most likely consuming this content is young men.
I have a gambling addiction. I've lost multiple 5 figures gambling at 18 years old. No one really knows this about me, except for probably my 2 closest friends. I talked to my parents about it today, but gambling is kind of taken over my life, and I'm an 18-year-old. It's terrible. I don't even own a fake ID, so I can't go to casinos or anything like that, but I'll go to poker rooms, I'll sports bet. There's ways to do it when you're 18. It's something that I've done for fun with my friends. It is a fun thing to do. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't, but it's really bad, guys.
I want to go straight to the comments. You are so close to so much money. If you stop now, you are teaching kids that look up to you that it's okay to quit. Do not stop. You're so close to a big win though. There are so many teenagers in this comment section telling him to keep going. While researching this video, I found so many teenagers posting gambling content on TikTok. This is no longer a niche problem, this is a generational one. This reminds me of the 1920s, right before the Great Depression. Ordinary people watched the rich get richer off of the stock market, so naturally they wanted a piece. But all they could afford were penny stocks, cheap like the name says, and very dangerous. Prices were easy to manipulate, fraud was everywhere, and most people lost money. Sound familiar? We're seeing the same thing today on Kalshi. People are betting pennies. For just 25 cents or 25 pennies, you can bet yes that the US will confirm aliens exist before January 2029. And interestingly, there's one industry that hates Kalshi. Casinos. I wonder why. Maybe because you no longer need to visit a casino to gamble. You can do it straight from your couch or your friend's wedding. The good news, many states have already sued or are currently suing, alleging Kalshi is running illegal gambling. But despite the lawsuits, people still view these markets as a source of truth, even as people are being paid to manufacture the truth they want.
Basically, I have been struggling with a sports gambling addiction to a point where I was betting every single day. I wagered $75,000 in 2023 and I made $7,000 profit. So I was like, okay, this is awesome. Within that year, there were nights where I was gambling $1,000 on something. Fast forward, I finally decided to tell my siblings 26 days ago because I had lost my job about a month ago and I was betting and gambling and losing money. I was just giving money away as an unemployed person. the way that sports gambling is moving right now in the world and on social media and TV, it's everywhere, and it's being so normalized and so put in your face to where it says, it tells you to do it because it's easy. It tells you to do it because you get a bonus if you do this. Even if you lose, get your money back.
Welcome. This is ZomboCom. Welcome to ZomboCom. You can do anything at ZomboCom. Anything at all. The only limit is yourself. Welcome to ZomboCom. Welcome to ZomboCom. This is ZomboCom. Welcome to ZomboCom. This is ZomboCom. Welcome. Yes, this is ZomboCom. This is ZomboCom, and welcome to you who have come to ZomboCom. Anything is possible at ZomboCom. You can do anything at ZomboCom. The infinite is possible at ZomboCom. The unattainable is unknown at ZomboCom. Welcome to ZomboCom. This is ZomboCom. Welcome to ZomboCom. Welcome. This is ZomboCom. Welcome to ZomboCom. Welcome to ZomboCom. Welcome to ZomboCom. This is ZomboCom. Welcome. This is ZomboCom. Welcome to ZomboCom. You can do anything at ZomboCom. Anything at all. The only limit is yourself. Welcome to ZomboCom. Welcome to ZomboCom. This is ZomboCom. Welcome to...
I've already asked you this question more than once, and every time you answered it. So has it...
Я вже пам'ятаю, як то задавав вам русський цей вопрос і не раз. І ви що-то кожен раз на нього як-то так неуверенно відповідали, то, ну, наверное, придется спросить еще раз. И чтобы не слушать в ответ ваше вот это вялое мычание, давайте я его трошки даже так переформулирую. Если раньше мы пытали вас, а зачем вам военно-морский флот, то сейчас уже вопрос стоит, а зачем вам флот вообще? И даже так, а зачем вам море? Если в ближайшее время ни вы, ни мы, мы это осознаем, пользоваться ним никто буде не в состоянии, но нам хоча б не так обідно буде. Бо у нас того воєнно-морського флота толком ніколи і не було. Зато у вас. Його було стільки, що він вам, ну, один тільки позор постійно і приносив. І нічого ж не помінялось. Тому, знаєте, ну, якщо у вас там на ничці ще де-то щось ховається, то переживати вам цей позор постійно. Другої функції у цього вашого флота, похоже, вже давно нема.
Новороссийск все. Одна из крупнейших транспортных компаний России отказалась перевозить грузы через Черное море.
Да просто отказалась. Ну, надоело. Настроение, может, поменялось. Или, может, то и Новороссийск на другую работу решил яку-то устроиться. Мало что у него там в жизни произошло. Забухав, влюбився. Хотя, ну, тих, хто внимательно слідить за новостями із цього регіону, їх цими отмазками давно не купиш, судьба Новороссийска давно не в його руках.
Новороссийск пережил страшную ночь. ВСУ нанесли комбинированный удар по городу-герою. Военные отразили массированную атаку украинских БПЛА и безэкипажных катеров на Новороссийск, длившуюся более 8 часов.
Ну, отразили, мої вам поздравлення, можна було б і новость тоді оцю не писати. Тоді б ми навіть не уточняли, бо чим же ж ви, інтересно, цю атаку отражали. Хоча ми і так знаємо. А всім чим тільки могли. Кораблями, причалами, терміналами, елеваторами, складами, ну всім, що там тільки було.
Бахи, бахи, бахи! 5 часов подряд Украина атакует Новороссийск. Что рассказывают местные жители? В Новороссийске уже 5 часов подряд идет отражение очень мощной атаки БПЛА. Вот что сообщают военные. Еще группа БПЛА в направлении Новороссийска. Новороссийск, тревога по БЭК. Мысхака, опасность по ФПВ, широкая балка, ФПВ. Сообщает канал с предупреждениями об опасности ЛПР-1. Так что к БПЛА добавилась атака безэкипажных катеров. В районе набережной от улицы Исаева до улицы Суворовской движение транспорта перекрыто, сообщает в администрации города.
А чё ты, Колян, таким тревожным голосом цю новость читаешь? Наоборот, радостней надо, веселіше, Росія, що по-твоєму? Зря цю війну почала, зря її далі веде. Да, це тільки ми, там, 4 з хвостиком года назад, це тільки ми раніше реагували так на всі события, а зараз і у русских уже ця чакра відкрилась, причому відкрилась сразу отако. Навстіж, тепер то ви хоч чувствуєте, що ну не зря все-таки ваша страна цю войну начала. Де без столько ще таких многогранных впечатлений набралось?
Офицер на передовой, комитет офицеров России. Было адски страшно. Жители Новороссийска после ночной атаки советуют не ехать на отдых. Жительница Новороссийска рассказала о ночи, которая, по ее словам, стала одной из самых страшных. С 22:00 до 6:00 люди слышали взрывы, сообщалось о погибших и загоревшихся зданиях. После произошедшего местные жители уже отговаривают туристов приезжать на отдых. В городских чатах люди пишут тем, кто приехал в регион: билеты назад брать, вы вообще сумасшедшие? От привычного курортного сезона к советам туристам как можно скорее уезжать домой.
А де хоча б якісь об'яснення? Що вдруг ви людям решили отпуск пересрати своїми такими непонятними істериками? Или хоча б, як-то б намікнули б. Ну от якого ляда ми взагалі на той ваш бідненький Новороссийск накинулися, як пантери якісь. Стояв собі, нікого не трогав, і тут на тобі бац, вдруг який-то акт неспровоцированной агрессии.
Украина заявила о поражении 2 фрегатов в порту Новороссийска, куда Россия перевела корабли из-за ударов морских дронов. В порту Новороссийска в результате атаки в ночь на 12 августа были поражены 3 российских военных корабля, включая фрегаты «Адмирал Эссен» и «Адмирал Макаров», которые способны нести крылатые ракеты «Калибр», используемые для ударов по Украине, и которые до этого попадали под удары весной. Об этом заявили в Главном управлении разведки Минобороны Украины. Утверждается, что третье подвергнувшееся атаке судно – это патрульный корабль проекта 22160 «Василий Быков», на котором может быть размещена установка пуска ракет «Калибр», «Оникс», а также ЗРК «Гибка» или «Штиль-1».
А русські СМІ утверждають, що ви завжди брешете. Що ніяких 3 кораблів ви не поражали. Це вони поражаються. Що як взагалі можна бути такими близорукими? Ну да, ніч, темно. Да. Ну ви ж своїм рекордним кількістю дронів там таку ілюмінацію устроїли. Вам що повилазило, що там взагалі 4 корабля стояло. И давайте быстрее соглашайтесь, бо вони сейчас по чумок и 5-й на нас спишут.
Атака на Новороссийск затронула базу Черноморского флота и нефтяной терминал Шесхарис. Подробности. На базе ВМФ России предположительно получили повреждения фрегаты «Адмирал Макаров» и «Адмирал Эссен», тральщик проекта 266М, судно «Виктор Чираков», патрульный корабль проекта 22160 и разведывательный корабль «Приазовье». Также зафиксированы удары по наземной инфраструктуре 4-й бригады подводных лодок.
О, а я вам что говорю, уже 5. Подожди, Колян, не йди пересчитувати. Не надо. Дайте, подождемо, коли дим там окончательно розвіється, круги на воді успокояться, і вполне вероятно вони зараз і 6-й де-то нігде знайдуть. І я, кажись, поняв, в чому проблема. Ми ж не знали, що то кораблі. Та ми думали, то які-то там стандартні постройки посеред моря, вони ж вже давно нікуди не плавали. Вони з цього порту навіть носа висунуть боялись. Зато калібрами по нам пулялись регулярно. І оті бідненькі, нещасненькі жителі Новороссийска, яких так і бахи, бубухи, отак вони їх бідненьких напугали. Вони ж навіть не думали, що ті калібри, що вони теж кому-то там жизнь портять. А так, ну, бачите, попортили тільки їм. Оце вони замітили.
Новороссийск остался без воды после массированной атаки дронов.
В смысле без води? Він же на березі моря стоїть. Ви що, вже і море просрали куди-то? Лузери. А я давно говорив, що їм те море нахрен не нужно. Ну не вміють вони ним пользуватися і нам не дають. Вони от що-то собі рішили, що вони тільки нам можуть судоходство переривати, да, а то, що і ми вміємо в цю ігру поіграти, вони тільки зараз щось поняли. Ні, поняли, ну куди ж доходчиві-то?
Украина сократила экспорт пшеницы в 4,3 раза на фоне остановки черноморских портов. Экспорт украинского зерна рухнул в разы из-за простоя портов Большой Одессы.
Це я спеціально зараз так издалека начал, решив, ну хоч чим-то порадувати русских патріотів, бо де-то до 12 числа такі новості визивали у них ну, таку реально прямо ерекцію. Що, ну, типа, от вони реально із-за цього свою дурну війну і почали, що от іменно в цьому і був весь її смисл. І не знаю яких, а ну, нас ви убедили. Да, це серйозний удар по економіці, ніхто не скриває, серйозний. Тому ми вирішили відповідати вам взаємністю. А там посмотрим, кому воно по факту вийде больней.
После уничтожения рэба, прикрывающего Геленджик и Новороссийск, ВСУ нанесли массированный удар по порту. Это был не просто обстрел, а целенаправленная операция. ВСУ направили на него все доступные ресурсы. Зеленский заявил, что применялись реактивные БПЛА «Поляныця» и «Барс», ракеты «Нептун» и «Беки, а целью стали позиции ПВО, причалы и инфраструктура порта. На картах пожара видно, что горело в районе терминала Шесхарис, на базе ВМФ, а также в районе зернового элеватора и грузового терминала. Еще один пожар был просто над городом, но точно ущерб еще устанавливается осинтерами. Может быть, будут обнаружены другие интересные пораженные объекты.
Так он уже плюс один корабль обнаружився, а потом обнаружилось, що не одні тільки ми вже не способні щось по морю возити, а потом обнаружилось, що ми вас запросто можемо вообще від моря відрізати. А потом, ще раз повторяю, посмотрим, кому воно буде больнее. А якщо ми там, ну, щось в цьому хаосі творящемся, може, щось і пропустили, то вы только дайте знать, можем и повторить, или пока не надо, пока достаточно, да?
По итогам налета на Новороссийск проблемы, похоже, гораздо серьезнее, чем казалось. Железнодорожные перевозки в порт полностью остановлены как минимум до 22 августа. Российские железные дороги ввели ограничения на перевозку грузов в Черноморский порт Новороссийск. Погрузка в направлении станции Новороссийск и Новороссийск-Экспорт ограничена с 13 по 22 августа 2026 года. Причем это касается, похоже, всех грузов, а не только зерна.
Ну, ми ж не ви, ми от це все не заради одного такого зерна робили. Нас якраз там другі ваші грузи інтересували, які вже толком ніхто й не скаже, воно там все одним махом згоріло, де в принципі і чорт з ним. Считайте, що це ми вам просто таку одну вісточку передали, що нічого із того, чим ви питаєтесь за кошмари нас, от нічого із цього не проходить повз нашу увагу. І буквально все, що ви питаєтесь засунути нам, ми ж обов'язково приміряємо потім на вас. І обов'язково вас в цьому компоненті перевершимо. Єдине, чого ви не зможете нам зробити, от ніяк не зможете. Ви не зможете потопити наш воєнно-морський флот за неімінням такого. А ми ваш можемо. І потопимо. Куди б ви його там не ховали, ви ж уже поняли, да? Що ми обов'язково от вас же ж його іще глубже куди-то перепрячемо. Так, ну і тепер давайте традиційне п'ятничне.
Welcome to Politics Chat, in which I try to answer your questions about modern politics. So let's get into some of your questions, and as usual, I'm going to try and cover a whole bunch of things that you've asked about putting them in a story. And I, as you know, it was only yesterday, I set up the idea that Trump is significantly weakening, as is his administration. And as that happens, the people around him and the people around him are grabbing as much money, first of all, but also power as they possibly can to try and cement into the government the things that they want rather than what the American people want, because the American people really don't like what Trump is doing. His approval rating is at about 33%, which is abysmally low, down there with where Nixon was after Watergate and where Trump was immediately after the January 6, 2021 assault on the U.S. Capitol, when he tried to change the outcome of the 2020 presidential elections. So While that's happening, he and his people are really working to grab a whole bunch of power. And one of the things that you all asked me about, I mean, it was kind of astonishing, is this new report that the board of the Kennedy Center, now remember, he handpicked the majority of the members of the board on the Kennedy Center. And they promptly turned around and elected him the chairman of the board of the Kennedy Center. So this is absolutely a Trump thing. Has voted today not only to go ahead and close the center for 2 years allegedly for renovations, but when he took it over, those people who were due to perform there ran away and said, we don't want to have any part of this. So they have had a really hard time actually booking acts. But they also voted to put in letters on the facade of the building where John F. Kennedy's name currently is, a script saying that the building was, quote, restored and renovated by President Donald J. Trump. And, once again, they're trying to get around what the law actually says. The Congress, when it dedicated the building, made it very clear that nobody's name other than JFK's could be on it and so on. And they're just trying to find a way around because Trump cannot take no for an answer. And no, the tarps are still up there. I've referred to them as those trousers because they look a little bit like somebody wearing trousers so that we can't see it without his name on it. But this is just Trump being a child. And being determined to win in some fashion. Something, by the way, that we all must keep in mind. If anybody tells you he will not try to steal the midterms, they simply have they must have no concept of object permanence, because if you look at the way he has behaved all along, he will 100% try to steal that election, and again 2028 as well. So that doesn't mean he's going to succeed, but this is not something we can look away from. Okay, so that's what's going on with the Kennedy Center. Is it going to last? It's going to be challenged in court, and it is my expectation, and again, I wish I had time to talk to you about why I think this. I'll figure it out. The American people hate this, and it certainly looks as if we are on track to really stop the Trump administration from doing the things that it's doing. And so remember, again, we're looking at 2-year closure, and then where we'll be after that. This seems like it might just be face saving, but certainly this is going to be something that's going to be challenged and that we will have to speak up about. And Congress certainly is going to speak up about it. I hate to do this to you, but I do want to remind you that Congress actually passed a law, not a suggestion, but a law, that within a certain area in Washington, D.C., where the majority of the monuments are, that in order to add a monument, there has to be an explicit congressional law to add that monument. And so the triumphal arch Trump wants to add, for example, is completely illegal. I mean, there's literally a law saying you can't do this unless Congress passes a law. And that's all of these things will continue to be challenged in court, and he's just trying to bulldoze over them. All right. But let me go through some of the other ways in which I talked about how the Trump administration was trying to garner as much money as it could. But remember, one of the truisms of an authoritarian government is that it will put in place people who are weak on their own. They couldn't be in those positions in a meritocracy because they are themselves not, real movers and shakers. And so they cleave to the person in power because they recognize that without him, first of all, they would never be in that position. And they could never get it again if he doesn't continue to be in power. But also that they need his protection because the chances are usually pretty good that they have crossed legal lines. And without the protection of that person, they're up that creek without a paddle. So you can see certain people trying to grab as much ideological power as they can, as well as the financial power. And the places I want to call that out today are in immigration and in public health. So one of the things to remember is that what Trump and his acolytes have done with immigration is enormously unpopular. Even when you ask in general, not specifics, but in general, the American adults, whether they approve of Trump's handling of immigration, which is a very general thing, only 40% of them say they do. And if you get down into specific things, the deportations and the detentions and deportations of people who've been in the country for a long time, have no criminal record and so on, those numbers drop even more significantly. But even though only about 40% of Americans agree even vaguely in general with Trump's approach to immigration, the Trump administration over the course of the summer has really ramped up its attacks on immigrants. And one of the things that it's done is ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, has teamed up with Transportation Security Administration. So ICE has teamed up with TSA to get access to the names of people on flight manifests who might have overstayed their visas. Now, you would overstay your visa for a number of reasons, usually that you are looking for an extension of your visa, or that you have green cards, or you have a valid work permit. You're waiting for a green card and you have a valid work permit. So these are not people who arrived, and are scofflaws. They're people who are in the system, waiting generally. A newlywed, for example, is another example of that. Well, what they have done is in an attempt to arrest 2,000 people a day, which is a huge number and way above where they have been. They're trying to grab anybody they can find. And this access to TSA's manifests has enabled them to go into the airports and start snatching people. And they're snatching people like foreigners who have recently married an American, or one of the guys that they took was an engineer who was waiting for his work visa. These are people who are in the system, and this is not popular, the fact that we're grabbing these people. But that's not the least popular thing that the administration has done over the course of the summer. They have also tried to move through the backlog of immigration cases as quickly as is humanly possible. And so what they've done is they have grouped them into sometimes more than 100 people cases a day to go in front of a judge who is making decisions sometimes as fast as 5 minutes at a time to force people through the system. And one of the things that this has done is because they're moving these cases along so quickly, people aren't learning that they have their day in court. They're not getting that notice. And so they don't show up, and they instantly get pushed into a deportation order. So they're increasing things that way as well. They're also they've also been in a real scandal by the fact that the administration permitted the federal contract for representing children who crossed into the U.S. without a parent. There's about 24,000 of them in the country right now, to have legal representation. And there had been a contract for that. They permitted it to expire, and then they tried to award a no-bid contract for $150 million to a small Texas law firm that had no experience doing this sort of work. There was such an outcry, the Texas firm said that they would not accept the contract, that they had asked for smaller pieces of it. But right now, those kids are now having to be represented by the government, and obviously there's a huge mess on their hands. But somebody asked me, how are taxpayer dollars getting into the hands of people like Donald Trump? And I think what we are going to discover when we actually get to dig into the extraordinary use of federal contracts in this 4-year period is the degree to which we've had very, very heavily padded federal contracts from which there have been kickbacks. And you can see this, I suspect, in many of the contracts we have heard about for example, the White House, where the White House complex currently, the money that appears to be going into it, has climbed from Trump's original estimate of, I think he originally said 200 million, then became 400 million. Now the number is currently, as far as we know, at least $927 million, which is, I know I'm not great at math. Boy, that looks a lot like $1 billion to me. And my guess is there's very little oversight of that. So this is another case there, but we're not done yet. We have had another immigrant die. This one at Delaney Hall And when he was transferred from Delaney Hall to an emergency room, Delaney Hall's in New Jersey, to an emergency room on July 18th after allegedly suffering a seizure. And then on July 22nd, the Department of Homeland Security said he had been released from ICE custody that day on July 22nd. And that is probably a reflection of the new policy of the federal government that if a detainee is released from custody, the DHS does not have to report their death because they're no longer in detention, which many people think is an attempt to walk away from the deaths that are related to their experience in custody, like the two people now who died of exposure after being released in inappropriate clothing without anywhere to go in the wintertime by people in the Department of Homeland Security. So then we also have the other thing that many of you have asked about is the announcement on August 10th that from ICE that they would spend up to $20 million on shock gloves. And Tom Homan, the person who is an advisor to Trump on border issues, has presented the idea of these shock gloves as a less lethal way for ICE and Border Patrol agents to subdue those that they feel they need to gain control over. But the idea that somehow this will be a step, a better step than guns is in a funny way, not a funny way, is in a way just bizarre. If you don't want people who we've employed shooting people, the answer is not to give them another way to hurt people. And the story on these shock gloves is available today in Wired by Jeremy White. The manufacturer says that the gloves are supposed to deliver, and there's a long explanation of how they work, but extraordinary pain, and that people should be subdued within 3 seconds because of the kind of pain. The manufacturer also warns that the gloves should not be used for more than 15 seconds. And by the way, they have to be activated. There's a place on the wrist that you tap to activate them. And that the operators must only touch people's arms or legs, not their faces, not their throats, not their groin, not their chest. And the gloves should not be used on the elderly, on people with severe disabilities, on children, or on pregnant women. And by the way, there's
Итак, пацаны, сегодня мы кайфуем.
There's nothing I'm going to be able to do about it, and I won't be able to come back. We'll lose power for a while if it does happen. And when that happens, by the way, I'm safe here. Just means something's hit the wires. I live in the woods, and that crucially, it also says this technology must not be used to stop people from talking back to you. It should not be used solely to cause pain, and it should not be used for torture. So that's what is on the menu right now for ICE. And should we speak up about it? Absolutely. This is bonkers. Sorry, but I'm speechless. And I do want to point out that I think we are seeing the symbol of what this administration is trying to do, especially people like Deputy White House Chief of Staff Stephen Miller, who is trying to purge brown and black people from the United States of America by what they are doing to Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio. Now, remember, the 350,000 Haitians who arrived in this country recently did so under what was called temporary protected status. It's a status that can be used if you come from a country where there is war, gang warfare, a natural disaster, and of course, Haiti has suffered all of those things. And they came legally to this country, and they were working legally in this country. And both the mayor of the town of Springfield, Ohio, and the Republican governor, Mike DeWine, who is a Republican, as I just said that these people had been great for the economy, that they were welcome here in Springfield, and that they had revitalized Springfield's economy by taking jobs in manufacturing and in food packaging. But if you remember, then Ohio senator talked about his own people in such a way in his quest to become the vice president of the United States. This would be J.D. Vance, lying. This was never real, lying that the Haitian immigrants were eating the dogs and cats of the native-born people in Springfield, Ohio. And Trump, of course, echoed that. In the heels of that false accusation that they were eating pets, schools were forced to close because of threats, and there was a neo-Nazi march against the immigrants there in Springfield, Ohio. Anyway, once she was in power, former Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, declined to renew the temporary protected status for Haitians and also for Syrians, also in who have real trouble going home. She didn't even bother to try. She said there's a bunch of steps you're supposed to take to evaluate whether or not a country should still, or people from a country should have temporary protected status. She didn't bother to do that, made a bunch of racist statements. And on the basis of that, a judge said, you can't stop their temporary protected status because you haven't actually gone through the hoops you were supposed to go through. In April, the U.S. Supreme Court overturned that and said, yes, she can go ahead and do that. It doesn't make any difference whether or not she has gone through the hoops. She made that decision, thereby stripping about 350,000 Haitian immigrants of their legal status, throwing them into this illegal or undocumented status. What they have been doing after that, there's a lot of confusion. What's going to happen to these people? They came legally, and now that status has been stripped from them. And within the last couple of weeks, what happened was that people from DHS actually sent emails to a number of the Haitians who had been under TPS. And remember, they're registered with the government and so on, telling them they had to report to a certain place. When they did so, they were fitted with ankle monitors. Really traumatic for a lot of people, but for even more than that, for historians, the marking of a certain group of people with government authorized and very obvious machinery is like a whole factory of red flags, right? So that's gone on. And then, and again, I think this is really very deliberate. This is the sort of thing that, as I say, Stephen Miller would have come up with. But then we also have the fact, as I talked about before, that the Trump administration is still talking about that border wall, and in the process of doing so has awarded $1.72 billion to put in new roads, to build some barriers and so on in Big Bend National Park in Texas, which is big in the state of Rhode Island. And the people who live there say, we don't need a barrier. We've got them. They're called mountains. And other people have said, if you're concerned, why not use drones, which are about the undocumented crossings, which are only about 1% of the undocumented crossings that tend to come to the United States, and which now, of course, we're at an all-time low. Why not just use drones? But again, we've got $1.72 billion with a B dollars going into this program of really destroying this extraordinary national park. So this focus on immigration, and going ahead and doing this extraordinary immigration detention and deportation, and I haven't even talked about the flights here, I think is a way for people like Miller to get as much ground in as he can before there is either a Democratic president or at least a Democratic Congress to slow these things down. But at the same time, you are seeing the fact that there's increased reporting on the fact that the Department of Justice has had to back off of sex trafficking cases, of tax evasion cases, of drug cases, and so on, because it's devoting its people and its money to immigration issues. And that's something the American people aren't going to like either. We also have increased oversight from Democrats, newly empowered, to point out for things as they did today, Senator Patty Murray, a Democrat of Washington, and Senator Chris Murphy, a Democrat of Connecticut. It strikes me you're going to have to watch this with the talk slowed down. Sorry about that. Have asked DHS, the head of DHS now, former senator from Oklahoma, Markwayne Mullin, to explain why DHS bought 12 new planes, including one that came, and I quote, fully equipped with a bedroom and other luxury amenities like a shower, kitchen, bar, and flat screen TVs. The bedroom has apparently been removed now, and they did so allegedly to move people around, like Kash Patel, the FBI director, and Tom Homan, Trump's border advisor. The FBI does already have a plane for its own. They didn't, they bought this other one as well. What Murray and Murphy said was that this administration has lit taxpayer dollars on fire by acquiring new and unnecessary planes to jet Trump officials around in extreme luxury that the vast majority of Americans will never experience. All right, so if that's what's going on with their ideological attempt to grab hold of immigration and push through as much of that as they can, there's also the issue of the anti-vaxxer who is at the head of the Department of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And he has, if you remember, he managed to make it through his Senate confirmation by promising the medical doctor who sits in the Senate, Bill Cassidy, of Louisiana, a Republican of Louisiana, that he would not change vaccine schedules. And then, of course, as soon as he was confirmed, he began to do so. And on Monday, back in January, the administration began to cut the number of vaccines it recommended for children. But on Monday, even while we're in the middle of a measles outbreak, Trump issued an executive order to force states to break up the MMR vaccine, measles, mumps, and rubella, into 3 separate vaccines. And I want to call your attention here to the fact that this actually won't have any effect on what the CDC recommends, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or on what insurance agents will cover. What it will do is insert real confusion into parents for what they should have their kids, what shots they should have their kids get. And crucially, and I say that because the separating those vaccines isn't even available in the United States, but they're trying to sow confusion. And I have to point out here that studies are, it's one of the things I did this afternoon was read studies about it. Studies are very, very clear that when you start to break up these vaccines, what happens is that poor kids don't get vaccinated because you have to you need 2 MMR shots, which means that you would need 6 of the separate vaccines. They have to be administered at certain times. That's 6 doctor's visits rather than 2 doctor's visits. And quite simply, some people won't be getting those vaccines. And you can draw your own conclusions about why they are doing that. Let me tell you, I got my own conclusions about what that is. All right, so if that's what they're trying to grab all this power, I do want to point out that they also seemingly are very, very concerned about the idea that Democrats might retake control of the House and the Senate. And they're trying to back and fill as much as they possibly can to protect themselves. And there's 2 major ways they have done that so far. And then there's a third way that came out today. And then I think I will have answered all your questions. As soon as he took office on August 10th, on Monday, August 10th, one of the first things that Todd Blanche, now as the real attorney general, not just the acting attorney general, confirmed by the Republicans in the Senate to become attorney general, one of the first things he did was to issue a memo from the Department of Justice. Now, this is not a law. It hasn't been tested, but this is the position of the Trump administration, saying that the president can shield the conversations that he has with civilians under the idea of executive privilege. Executive privilege says that usually says that the president can shield his conversations with other members of the executive branch in order for a president to be able to get honest appraisals of different policies without having to worry about things leaking to the press or without having to worry about subpoenas from Congress. And The Trump administration has used executive privilege to try and protect all kinds of things. And the Democrats got wise to that. So they have made it very clear that as soon as they retake control of one or both or houses of Congress, they're not going to try to subpoena members of the executive branch. They're going to subpoena businessmen and people from universities and private citizens to ask them about the deals that Trump has been cutting with colleges, with businesses, and with private citizens. So what they are trying to do with this new memo is say, you can't even talk to those people. You can't subpoena those people. And the Democrats have said, this is hogwash. This is absolutely ridiculous. You can't do that. But it's clear that the administration is really worried about investigations into what it has been doing. So watch that memo, okay? But here's something even bigger, and I'm all over this. You may not remember, but it was a big deal. You know, I always talk to you about how what I look for are game changers, like the cement coming out of the cement truck, and you watch it, it's kind of mesmerizing. But like if all of a sudden there's a bright child's toy in it, I always think of a dump truck with a red cab and a yellow bed in that stream of cement, you're going to sit up and take notice. Or if there's a leaping carp, those are the two things I always think of in my mind. Well, in late December 2020 and early January 2021, there was a child's toy in the cement coming out of the administration. And what I mean by that is that there had been a drop of documents to BuzzFeed News, which is now defunct, and also to the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, Syria. And they had done so using shell companies. Now, shell companies aren't real companies. They're companies that don't have a physical plant, don't actually do anything, but they're legal entities that can hold and move money. Well, you know where this is going. Shell companies are often used by criminals to make it look as if they are doing something legitimate to move money around. And we know that Trump uses shell companies because his fixer, Michael Cohen, used one to pay off adult film actress Stormy Daniels so she wouldn't speak up about their sexual encounter before the 2026 election. So what happened was when there was this news about how much money was being laundered in the United States, and the United States was one of the money laundering capitals of the world, the Congress began to sort of freak out about it on a bipartisan basis, by the way. And they passed a law called the Corporate Transparency Act. Is that right? Did I get that exactly right? Yes, the Corporate Transparency Act. And the Corporate Transparency Act worked to get rid of those shell companies that criminals were using to launder money, to evade taxes, and to engage in illegal payoff schemes like the one that Cohen used to pay off Stormy Daniels. And the act required that the owners of any company that was not already overseen by the federal government by filing taxes, for example, or there's some other ways in which that would be the case, had to file a report that identified every person associated with a company who owned more than 25% of it and who exercised what they called substantial control over it. That report would include a name, a birth date, an address, and an identifying number, and it would go to what's known as FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network in the Treasury Department. They also dramatically increased the penalties for money laundering, and they streamlined cooperation between banks and foreign law enforcement organizations. So the idea was to get rid of these shell companies in order to stop money laundering and the ability of using money laundering for crimes, right? So earlier this week, and I just want to point out here that one of the co-sponsors of the bill, the guy who wrote it, was Marco Rubio, then a senator from Florida, which kind of has a history involved in money laundering, and now Secretary of State and a real Trump loyalist. But what happened is earlier this week, FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, said that it was not only ending that registry that Congress said, oh, I'm sorry, let me go back a second. Congress passed the law, Trump vetoed it. It was part of the National Defense Authorization Act. Trump vetoed it, and Congress repassed it over his veto. It's not something that squeaked by. This is something that members of both parties thought we had to have. Now, FinCEN says it's not only ending that registry, I just can't even believe I have to give you this next piece of news. It is going to destroy all the data it has already collected on shell companies. So what they are essentially doing here is saying, quite literally, they are not going to enforce a law that Congress passed. Remember, the president's duty, he shall see that the laws are faithfully enforced. They're openly saying, we're not going to enforce this. Now, they're saying that it was the regulatory burdens were too extreme, especially for small companies. Do you buy that? I don't buy that. I think we should know who owns these shell companies, who is laundering money through them. And I will point out that one of the big complaints about the shell companies when they went to pass this law came from a Democratic lawmaker who said, it's illegal for foreigners to contribute to our political campaigns, but if you launder your money through a front company with anonymous ownership, there is very little we can do to stop you. So this, again, will open up the floodgates for foreign money, or could open up the floodgates for foreign money to come into American elections. But one last piece that you asked about, and again, I really have gone through this quickly, and again, maybe you can play it back more slowly for yourselves, because I really think these are all major, major, major stories, suggesting here, after setting up yesterday that Trump is very weak and the ways in which he's been grabbing money, and today that the ideologues in his administration are trying to get as much ideological ground as they can on immigration and on public health, or the anti-vax movement that Kennedy has backed for so long. What I'm trying to set up now is that they are very, very worried that there's going to be oversight from Democrats going forward if the Democrats actually win the midterm 2026 elections and then go into the election 2028. And the other piece of this, having set up the change in the idea that Trump can shield everything he's ever said to any private citizen, so long as it comes under the definition of an official act, but who's going to check, right? And aside from this FinCEN decision to stop trying to stop money laundering, but also today was the day that the Department of Justice had to justify to the judge, Emmett Sullivan, why they had made the redactions that they had in the Epstein files. Because if you recall, the Epstein Files Transparency Act that Congress passed on November 19th, or rather that Trump signed into law on November 19th, required, didn't suggest, it required that the Department of Justice release all the Epstein files by no later than December 19th. And for the few redactions it was allowed to make to cover up the names of victims, it had to explain why they had made those redactions. It was very, very clear. And the Department of Justice, it was, according to former Attorney General Pam Bondi, it was then her deputy, he became acting Attorney General when she resigned. It was Todd Blanche who made those redactions and kept so many of the files, more than half the files, back. Well, they have been dancing and dancing around this. Independent journalist Katie Fang sued for access to a number of documents, not all of them, but for a number of specific documents, saying that these had been illegally redacted. And the judge said to the Department of Justice, okay, explain why you did this. You were supposed to explain anyway. And the Department of Justice has danced and danced and danced and refused really to explain why. So today was the day that the Department of Justice was supposed to justify what they had done. And the Blanche was not in the courtroom, of course. The lawyers for the Department of Justice went in and basically they just stonewalled They did not produce anything new. They refused to say what they were doing. They said, we don't think she has standing, and that she, Katie Fang, has standing, and we're not going to tell you any more than we already have, which is simply extraordinary. The judge said that he was considering holding the Department of Justice in contempt of court. A little hard to think that wasn't, he said, I don't want to do this. But they're pretty openly saying to him, we're not going to tell you what the law requires. This is a real crisis for the rule of law in the United States. And you should absolutely have all three of those things on your radar screen, because the administration is making a last real grab for power, and to cement their power by simply saying, we're not going to answer to the law. And if they get away with this, let me tell you, we're going to have much bigger problems than Trump's name on the Department of Justice. Will be on the Department of Justice, on the Kennedy Center. So please watch those three things. Tell people about them, because in each case, it is the President of the United States and his cronies saying, we're not going to answer to the law, and we're going to continue to keep open the possibility that we can finance illegal actions without bothering to let Congress oversee what we're doing. These are really, really big deals, and they are a reflection, I think, of the fact Trump is weaker than ever. His ideologues are desperate to cement their power into place, and the only way they can do that is basically by telling the rest of us to, excuse me, but F off. So what do we do about all of this? First of all, please call people's attention. I actually did a TV show this morning. I don't like TV. You notice you never see me on TV. I don't like TV for a number of reasons. I don't watch it. It's not that I don't. The reason I don't watch it is not because I don't like it. I like watching it. I don't like being on it. But I actually did Morning Joe today to say, please pay attention. Please pay attention to this overturning, essentially, of the Corporate Transparency Act, which is such a big deal. It was such a big deal that it went into place, and it's such a big deal that they are now. I mean, I looked at that when it came out. If you've been following me for a long time, I wrote about it and wrote about it and wrote about it, because if we could tell where the illegal money was coming into our political system and into the country, that's a huge, huge step towards stopping the illegal manipulations of our political system, for example. It's a huge deal. And I'm afraid it's going to fall under people's radar screens, because you hear the word FinCEN and most people are like, what on earth is that? This was literally an attempt to get rid of anonymous shell companies so they could no longer move money around illegally. It was to stop money laundering. Now, if you were a president, why would you want to stop a law that makes it impossible for people to launder money in your country? Let me just leave it at that. And that I think is indicative. That and the fact Trump's trying to get immunity from the potential crimes committed under his taxes, under tax audits from before May of this year. I mean, there's a lot that it is imperative for the certain members of the Trump administration to hide. It is just as imperative that we get to see it, that we as Americans get to see it. So what do we do? First of all, I urge you to take a look, if you can, at Ben Wickler's book called something like The Plan, How We Reclaim American Democracy. It's something like that. Because he really lays out how one turns the ship of state. Too often people focus just on the presidency and figure, oh, we get the president, we're good. But that's not actually the way it works. The place to start is literally in your local school boards, your local town meeting, your local government, the people you elect to run your states. And as he points out, both in that book and in interviews, including an interview I did with him, that in every state in this union, there is a district that you could flip from Republican to Democratic. And the reason that this is important is you want to get those people into place, even if you're in even if it doesn't seem to you like there's important stuff right now, because we are 4 years out from another census. And one of the ways that the Republicans have grabbed an inordinate amount of power that is disproportionate to the support of the American voters is by having the control of state houses in the years, the 0 year, or the 10, 20, 30 years, because that's when we, as a country, take our censuses, and that's when we redistrict. You want to have Democrats in place in those years, not so they skew things in their own direction, so they put in place nonpartisan, can't say it enough, nonpartisan commissions to redistrict the states fairly. That does not mean, by the way, that every state will then be, 50-50. There is redistricting that benefits one state or the other, and that's a function of the kinds of districts that they make. Districts are, sometimes they do lean one direction or another. But when Michigan finally got fair redistricting, even though that redistricting did privilege Republicans, the Democrats had a sweep because voters were so angry at the Republican Party at that point. So you want to really push this idea of state governments that will level the playing field again. And it's really interesting, as Wickler points out, that when Wisconsin was forced toward a fair state map, the Republicans in the state, and mind you, this is just a fair map, it's not skewed toward the Democrats, said that given the choice between being stabbed, shot, you had this whole thing, they chose being stabbed. And this because they could fight again. And they were fighting for badly skewed maps toward the Republicans. They didn't want fair maps. They wanted skewed maps. We must get away from that. So focus at the state level, but also remember that in the states, there are elections for state Supreme Courts often, or state judges. Those are going to be really, really important. And again, continue to raise your voice and to talk about issues that you care about. This Big Bend thing in Texas is right up there with the boundary waters of Minnesota. And once again, the people who live in Texas and all Americans, because that's a national park, are taking a huge loss with that Big Bend National Park, as we did with the boundary waters. And once again, just think about how this administration is taking our wealth. And that certainly means our tax dollars, but it also means the things that make life worth living: education, community, health, family, the beauty of our natural spaces, and so on. And they're turning it into cash, and they're putting that cash in their own pockets. And that is, I look at this and I look at the skyrocketing debt and the fact that our deficit is the highest it's been in ages and so on, and thinking, because it had been on a downward slope, and thinking they are taking everything that Americans have worked for since at least World War II, and they're selling it to the highest bidder, and they're putting the money in their own pockets. And when they are gone, the cleanup is going to be absolutely brutal. But the faster we get them out of there, the faster we reclaim our country. And this is not a partisan thing, by the way. We need all voices to stand up against oligarchy, to stand up against authoritarianism, and to figure out a way forward together. The faster we do that, the easier it's going to be. And already it's going to be bad. So please stay in the game more and more. We got to carry weight for each other because everybody is tired, and it's not going to get better between now and the election. It's going to get worse. I warned you this summer was going to be a bad summer, and it's going to get worse. And you should just sort of grit your teeth and figure it's going to be at least December, if not January, before we can really breathe more easily, and even then maybe not. But this particular trajectory we're on is going to be a freaking roller coaster and hurricane all at once. But the good news is the reason it's so rough is because the American people are reasserting their will. And I will leave you with one thing that I hope will give you some hope, that feels to me like we have forgotten it. I talked a little bit about it yesterday. After Watergate, and remember, Trump's numbers are as low as Watergate numbers, Nixon's Watergate numbers. After Watergate, when Trump finally resigned in August of 1974, there was a midterm election just a few months later. And in that midterm election, Democrats flipped 49 seats away from the Republicans and to the Democrats. They flipped 5 seats in the Senate. When that happened, they began to pass legislation to rein in the crap that Nixon had done. But remember, there was still a Republican president in office after that. So then in 1976, the American people elected Jimmy Carter. And when Carter was in office with the promise of a new country, which a lot of people have forgotten about, but 74 even made strides against the Southern strategy by flipping 10 Republican seats to Democrats in the South for a new Democratic Party. A new Democratic Party that pulled together, white, young, even male Americans in 75 and 76 with people like the Allman Brothers backing Jimmy Carter and Leonard Skinner, when they were really calling out what the Republicans had done. Watergate doesn't bother me. Does your conscience bother you? Tell the truth. And people like Muddy Waters and this lineup of people behind Jimmy Carter to create a new nation. In 77 and 78, we get a whole slew of new dramatic legislation in favor of minority rights, in favor of women's rights. And part of the extraordinary backlash of the Reagan years was not a backlash just to the New Deal. It was a backlash because Americans looked at what Nixon had done and said, we don't want any part of that. And I think it helps to remember that existed. We've sort of written it out of existence. But that idea that in a period that looked much like our own, the American people really did take back the government. What they weren't prepared for was the juggernaut of right-wing media and the marriage of the Republican Party to the religious right that was going to sweep Reagan into office and begin the skewing of our political system to get stop people from voting. That starts in 1986, to gerrymander that really takes off in 2010, to flood the system with extraordinary money through things like Citizens United. They weren't prepared for that. We are. We could do it right this time. If you'd like to tune in live, I record these chats on Tuesday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Maine time on both my YouTube channel and my Facebook page. If you want to hear more from me, I write Letters from an American every night. It's available on Substack and on Facebook, and the audio version of the nightly letter is available the following day wherever you get your podcasts. And finally, on Saturday mornings, I talk with Dr. Joanne Freeman, the historian of the early republic, professor, and dear friend about history and politics. We call our talks What the Heck Just Happened, and you can find them on YouTube. Politics Chat is produced by Lauren Westfall. Music by Andrea Von Kampen.
Вот тут, короче, друган мой бывал точно. Ёпра, блин, Сербилина. Зачем, бля, чё? Интересно, до скольки сегодня скупщик работает? На, блядь, на, жри, сука! Ну что? Какой двигатель? Сдохни, тварь! Давай, нормально, живем, скажу.